It's been 2 years since the coronavirus pandemic shut down New York City. It was a catastrophic hit for the food industry, with restaurants forced to shut down. During the gradual steps of reopening to full capacity dining indoors, a lot of steps over a long period of time, those shutdowns meaning major financial losses of dreams and unemployment for thousands. So now restaurants no longer need to check if diners are vaccinated. People are going, but where are they going? One estimate finds there are nearly 100,000 fewer restaurant jobs since before COVID-19 hit in March of 2020. Our guest today is Camilla Marcus, co-founder of ROAR, Restaurants Organizing, Advocating, and Rebuilding. She's a chef, started a nonprofit, this one to support restaurant workers at the beginning. Camilla, welcome. How's everything? How's it going?
It remains very difficult. I mean, the landscape is constantly changing, and I think we're unfortunately very far not out of the woods.
Not out of the woods. Going back 2 years after everything was shut down in March of 2020, you acted quickly. Tell me about what you did.
Really, when we knew that the shutdown was coming, despite a lot of rhetoric, oh, go to restaurants, 3 days before the shutdown, I think our industry realized very quickly that no one understood that we can't work from home, and a shutdown really meant a decimation of the second largest private employer in New York City. 500,000 people in New York City work in restaurants, and day one had nothing. And so we galvanized almost immediately to figure out how to advocate for ourselves and take care of our people in really a time of total devastation.
And so it's advocating, meaning, hello, government, at every level. We need help. But it's also, in the meantime, you reached out to a very well-known foundation, and which really helped you raise money.
Our very first call was amongst ourselves, and then my next call was to the Robin Hood organization, which I worked with closely at my restaurant, Westbourne, in New York, and got on the phone with their then head, Wes Moore, and said, look, I don't think anyone sees that the tidal wave of this kind of unemployment and this many people who really are going to need cash, how are they going to pay rent come Friday when they have no jobs? The Department of Labor unemployment site crashed day one, and no one was even talking about our industry. Again, second largest private employer, that kind of scale, and it wasn't even an agenda item at any level of government. So they jumped in immediately to help.
That's just so good. And we know, because every one of these, when you talk about, you had to close your restaurant, other people closed, individual people with families, and just dealing with that personally, what was that like for you?
I mean, honestly, something that I never thought I'd ever deal with in my lifetime, and the kind of structural pain and devastation, as I said, really unlike anything we've ever seen. You've never really seen an entire industry of this scale and scope really wiped out almost overnight without anyone even noticing or caring or talking about it. So we really had to galvanize to help our own community immediately. And I think there was something really beautiful in that. I mean, if there was a silver lining, it was the community coming together and really connecting. But the stories are brutal, and, not everyone could be helped. And we're still facing, as you just noted, tremendous unemployment. So many businesses have closed, and it really is such a painful time still for so many families and so many people across New York City that should have been better taken care of.
The New York Hospitality Alliance estimates a few thousand restaurants and bars have closed. A few thousand. Do you have a sense of how many? How hard is that to estimate?
I think, unfortunately, it's still impossible to estimate. When people are dealing with a crisis, they're not going to respond to a survey all that reliably, and there's only so much information we can get. I think the effects of this and the real data will come out, I think, further in the future. But the scale and scope, I mean, all you have to do is walk down the street in New York, and you can see the lasting impact 2 years later. And you can see how many people have left New York and have left the industry and had to do something else. 2 years of not being able to work remotely. You have to switch careers for so many people. They don't have a choice.
Right.
They can't stay in New York. So unfortunately, I don't think we understand the full scope of the impact, but it's massive. And I think you just have to walk in your neighborhood to see.
Yes, the structures empty, like the restaurants opening, offering just bargain, 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 and standing at the door, you know, that just, it's heartbreaking to see. They're hurting. How can the city help? What needs to happen now?
Well, really, all levels of government have to do their part. You know, we were only given a very small fraction of what was asked for with the Restaurant Revitalization Fund at the federal level. Basically, a fifth was funded of what was promised. At the state level, you know, there's so many regulations and assistance and restructuring that needs to happen, both with taxes. I know there's a lot of discussion around to-go alcohol, the SLA level. And at the city level, part of the difficulty has been the regulations keep changing. Dining changing. You know, that was the lifeline for so many restaurants to say, okay, I can make it out because my capacity is now increased. I've created a whole new business plan. You know, an additional structure outside is basically a second restaurant, hiring people for it. And all of a sudden, you know, last week, all of the rules and the standards have been changing. So the challenge at the city level, I think, is really not a coordinated effort. And I think it could be much more strategic and most importantly, in more collaboration with the restaurant industries and organizations like the Hospitality Alliance and ROAR. We need a better seat at the table. And I think, unfortunately, that hasn't been the precedent really until this crisis.
Yeah, I don't even know to call it silver lining isn't right, but thank goodness ROAR is at the table. And one of the things that, just as we wrap up here, I was very touched. Some of the work that you've been doing also is about childcare. I mean, different things that have become, you know, more in the forefront because of the needs of employees losing their jobs and some families both losing their jobs. Just could you tell me a little bit about this childcare idea of yours?
So really, I think the future, especially in New York City, which should be, you know, the dining capital of the world,
Yes.
and that's hope to bring that back to its golden era through the efforts of ROAR. And, you know, the advocacy side is obviously our work with the government, but our philanthropy side is really focused on wellness and taking care of our community through healthcare, through wellness initiatives. And then something we're really thinking intensely about is childcare. You know, we don't have 9 to 5 Monday through Friday jobs, and structural and existing childcare professional systems don't operate on weekends and they don't operate outside of those traditional office hours. So much like COVID, you know, when the world shut down, everyone else went to their computers and worked at home and didn't realize millions of people across this country don't get to work from home. Similarly, if you have children in restaurants, the highest paid shifts are at nights and on weekends, exactly the time that our childcare systems set up in this country are completely shut out against. So again, you're talking about the second largest private employer that is structurally excluded from any form of support. So while, you know, parental leave is very important, really the bigger issue is you can't go back to work. And that's a challenge for such a large industry and one that is open access in this country. And it has to change.
It has to change. And we all need to go to a restaurant and embrace them. Embrace them, right? Camilla Marcus, thank you so much. Appreciate speaking with you today. And I'm in awe of the work you've done with ROAR. Best of luck. Camilla Marcus, entrepreneur, chef, co-founder of ROAR, Restaurants Organizing, Advocating, and Rebuilding. For more information about ROAR, go to our website, cbsnewyork.com.